I took a step back from the Post Malone business to start my own business. I had to put 100% focus into my business. What am I gonna do for my 2 daughters? What am I gonna do for the next generation? How am I gonna be able to show game to all of us watching this at home? How can you crack the code? Do you know it's the same thing we talked about before, that consistency and having thick skin. And that's what's helped me today to take it to the next level.
I'm Detavio Samuels, CEO of Revolt, and this is the Blackprint, the show that dives into the blueprint for Black success. Every episode, I sit down with talented CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry experts to explore their journeys to the top. This is the Blackprint. Welcome to the Blackprint. Here we start every show off the same way with my favorite quote. Everybody sees you on the mountaintop. Not everybody sees you on the climb. This is the show where we talk to the ceiling breakers, the disruptors, the innovators about their climb to the top. And today I'm happy to have my brother Dre London in the building. What's good, Dre?
Oh, thank you for having me, man.
Oh man,
Thank
it's
you,
a blessing. It's good to have another Yardie, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
a brother up in the studio.
Really, from Portmore to St. Anton, Mary, Jamaica.
So look, you know the vibe. We don't ever introduce our guests here. We believe that everybody should be the controller of their own narrative or their own story. Do me a favor, introduce yourselves to the people.
My name is Dre London, son of Janet Jackson, father of 2 daughters, official CEO. Like he said, at the mountaintop, no one knows how you got there. But the one word I would say is disruption. I'm here to disrupt, and I'm gonna continue disruption, whether you like it or not.
Dre London, the disruptor. All right,
Yes.
all right. Now look, let's go back to the beginning, right? We always try to get to the origin story. So you're originally from London, right?
Yeah, I was born in Brixton, South London, Angel Town Estate.
So tell me what life was like for you growing up in London. What was your early childhood like?
Wow, my early childhood was beautiful. I wouldn't say beautiful. It felt beautiful. Of course, you're a kid. You don't know where you grow up. You don't know what circumstances you've been dealt. And mine was in a council estate. For all those in America and around the world that's not from London, that doesn't understand a council estate, I think you guys call it housing. Or housing projects. Yes.
Right,
So I grew up in the Angel Town estate housing projects, and I know it shaped my future. I know coming from there, I don't think I would have had the hunger that I have elsewhere. Where if you come from Bel Air, I'm sure your hunger is definitely not going to be the same as Angel Town Estate. You understand what I mean?
I
So
do.
shout out to a couple of my brothers, 21 Savage, couple others that come from there too. And you're just surprised, man. When you come from there, like I said, it shapes you into a different man. I used to play a lot of soccer. You guys call it soccer. We call it football. I think that was also a big shaping of my life. I didn't really understand it at the time. I just knew I was like one of 2 Black guys in the teams playing for South London. Like South London was like basically a whole district, if that made sense. And I guess I was good in school at playing football. And it took me to going and playing tournaments and championships where I was probably one of the only 2-3 Black guys on the team. And then going out and playing in other places, it really taught me something that I didn't think later on in life would shape me to be ready for the world. It shaped me because, number one, if you can't work in a team, you're never gonna make it. Number 2, we'll talk about later with the facts of how coming from a different background can shape a lot from people who's not from that background, if that makes sense. Just like the Blackprint.
Yeah. So early on, you had this hunger. You still got that hunger? Dre today still got that hunger? On the mountaintop, you still got that hunger?
Yeah, I definitely do. Bar a little quick rice and peas today, I only eat once a day. For the whole month, I've only ate once a day, and I think I'm gonna continue it for the rest of the year. It brings a certain hunger when you're fasting. And like, for some reason, I don't know, I'm just gonna keep on doing it for the rest of the year because the hunger I have this year in 2025 is a total different hunger than I had in 2024.
What's driving that? Anything in particular that's driving this new hunger that you have?
Don Londres, number one, being one of the only people that look like me in the alcohol business has definitely shaped that. In the last year and a half since coming out, I've had to go into rooms called GSM, General Sales Meetings. I've had to go in these rooms where nobody looks like me, where no one can speak the passion of where we're coming from, adding the story to how I did this and how I came from nothing. So it kind of like just shaped my year in terms of what I need to do for the next year.
And I definitely want to get into the liquor industry, you playing in the space where, again, to your point, there's very few people who look like you. Let's help the people kind of get there. So born in the UK.
South London.
In South London. You make your way to the States. Why did you decide to come to the US?
So 2008, I just decided that, okay, not today, guys. No one at home give me no chastising. But in 2008, there wasn't really a hip hop scene in the UK. It was mostly grime, like shout out to Skepta, my brother. It was mostly grime and a few other like house music. It's always been house music, grime, and guys had to work their way in from there. The hip hop scene came years after I left. And my first travel was going and bringing an artist to New York. And I bumped into another artist through someone called French Montana. And me and French started becoming real friends. The artists I brought over started to learn the game from just the New York scene and the New York hustle. And then after that, I just said, he left and was going back and forth back to London. And I said, if you keep going back and forth, you're not going to see the American dream. Americans not stupid. You're not going to move to America and go back every other month and think you can take some of the American dream. Americans are very smart. You got to really be in it and be in the hustle with them. You see how I said project housing estates? You knew exactly what it is. When people see you going through the same everyday struggle as themselves, they then identify with you more. So for me, it was morely the everyday hustle of being here and knowing that I came with a little bag and a year or so, that bag was gone. And whether I wanted to or not, I was in the everyday struggle and hustle, just like Americans. And people identify that. People identify the American dream coming from the bottom to the top. Started from the bottom, now we're here.
So you said you came over with a little bag. Talk to me about your setup. I'm always interested when people make bets, and moving from the UK to the US is a big bet, right? I'm a big believer in this strategy. I talk about burning ships. I can't remember who it is from old school history, but whenever they sent ships to a different country to go to war and take over, they would get there by, get onto land and then burn all the ships so that the warriors knew, if you don't go conquer this town, there is no way home. There is no way back. They just sent them in, right?
I like that.
And so I think a lot of times when we are in spaces and we want to make real bets on ourselves, it's important to burn those ships, burn the insurance so that you only have one way forward. Talk to me about your approach to coming to the U.S. Were you burning ships? You said you had a little bag, so I don't know what that means. Were you burning ships? Did you have lots of different avenues, pathways? What was your approach?
I had a few, I had the streets. And other than the streets, I then learned, before the streets, I was buying and selling cars. I always wanted to look good, and I tried to figure out a way how I could do it. So I would buy cars with, shout out to anyone looking for another hustle today, it still exists. I would buy a car or something with the door crashed or something like where I could bring it to the mechanic shop, have them fix it, the body shop. Shout out to Monday. You probably think I don't remember your name, but Monday, I remember you, bro. Shout out to Monday. He used to fix all my cars back in the day. And I wanted to ball. Like, as being black and from nothing, we always want to ball. And we don't really understand the way to balling. And that I didn't know was helping me shape a way to ball. But like, I was 18 years old and my first car was a 1996 BMW. For everyone, it looked so glamorous. But to me, they didn't see the car with the crash, if that makes sense. They would just see the finish line, which is pretty much today. And I started that. Then after, when I was on the street hustle, I found something during the street hustle. I bought my first house. And then I continued hustling, grinding, and something really hit me. The house was making more money than me. The house had probably gone up 60, 70, 80, maybe 100,000 at the time, while my money was going up and down, up and down, up and down from being on the streets. And that's when I started saying, hold on a second, if this property can make more than I did in that space of a time of maybe 2 years, or had a better run, that's the word. I wouldn't say made more than I did, had a better run. And that's when I started waking up and saying, okay, now I'm gonna start hustling houses the same way I looked at cars. I'm gonna start looking at just different concepts of how I could come up. And then it wasn't that long, because maybe 5, 6 years later, I moved and went to America. Left the UK, said I felt like there was better. Actually, it wasn't better. I just actually thought I was hitting a ceiling. In the UK, there's like a certain ceiling. I felt like I just left Toronto and Canada. I feel like people in Canada feel the same way. I don't know if it's the Commonwealth countries. I don't know if it's the king and queen. They're not my king and queen, but just the king and queen. I don't know, but I just felt like you keep hitting a ceiling. And America, like, you've all heard at home of the American dream. I never heard of the British dream. I never heard of the Canadian dream. I'm not from Canada. I'm just giving you an example. And I wanted to go and seek that American dream, that rags to riches story that makes so many people famous and so many people spear to another level here, you know?
So you came here in search of the American dream. I think oftentimes, again, people see you on the top. They don't really understand how you got here. What were some of the sacrifices, unseen hustles that people may not know that you had to do early on in order to pave the way for you to get here?
I did a lot, man. One of the ones that really stuck out to me, shout out to Dion. I know you're somewhere in Atlanta. Shout out to Dion, and shout out to a couple of my close guys that lived in New Jersey. 'Cause I moved to New York, and then I saw there was like, you could leave New York and you could look over the bridge and you would see New York, if that makes sense.
Absolutely,
So
Brooklyn.
I felt like me moving to New Jersey, and you could have did Brooklyn, but I moved and came to Brooklyn. I saw Brooklyn. Shout out to East 46 between Foster and Farragut. That's where I lived when I first came. My cousins and them was there. And one day I was in the park, as you know, in the hood, everyone's in the park or whatever. My cousins then was slapping dominoes, Jamaicans, blah, blah, blah. And I just looked around and I said, I didn't move here for this. Every day, this was like my third day in the same park, seeing the same thing. I'm like, no. So I got it together. I started going to Manhattan more, started making communications, connections in Manhattan. Then I moved to New Jersey. But the sacrifice, not forgetting, I remember was 1 year I didn't buy nothing. And in terms of like not buying nothing, I mean it like, you go to the supermarket, you don't eat out for a year, 2 years, a year and a half at least. I didn't buy a pair of sneakers. I didn't buy pants. I didn't buy nothing. Every single thing I did that had some form of an income, I sacrificed the whole year, year and a half. I used to just go out. Yes, in America, same hustle. I used to go out, hustle, not on the block, but go out, do what I had to do, come back in, and I just started studying the internet. And I know it sounds crazy, but studying the internet in terms of anyone could look at Google and think Google's gonna give you an answer. It doesn't. You have to put it in to know what you want back. So I started just grinding on the internet and learning as much as I could about the American hustle, about the music business, the business of music. And believe it or not, I had to learn football. Not my football, not the soccer, not the English football. I had to learn American football, NFL. And you might say, how? What did the NFL do for you? And how was the NFL helping you with America? The NFL is still one of the biggest things I ever learned in America because it taught me about America, if that makes sense. When you watch football on a Sunday, you might not look at it in the same outlook, but I saw majority black players playing, but there was no black owners. I saw a lot of football players that was huge. Shout out to Michael Vick. He was my first favorite football player. Michael Vick was a beast. And I just started like learning the American story behind the NFL. I know it sounds crazy. How do you put sports with an American country? But everyone on a Sunday watches football. Maybe some of the women don't like it. They still around watching it. And I just learned that if I was gonna learn America, I had to find some form of an input and an outlet. And I think that was the NFL.
What was the impact? You mentioned this idea that you're watching all of these black athletes play, but no one black has ownership. Did that have an impact on you? What did that tell you about America?
It told me that no matter how I felt like, ooh, shout out to Ice as well. No matter how I felt that I knew America, I didn't. Because you might know New York, you might know LA, you might know in Atlanta, or even in Miami. But the rest of America, it's not the same. You got to touch that middle point of America. What happened to your Ohio's, your Kansas City, all the places where it's not so luxury, but they're actually running the country. If you ask Donald Trump, he'll tell you.
No, look, I think that's exactly right. I think we've had that point come up on this show a couple of times as well. For me, the way that I've always seen it is culture moves from the outside in.
Correct.
And so we talk a lot about the New Yorks, the Miamis, the LAs, right? Because there's so much influence. But I think when we have that conversation that's really all about influence, you lose where the masses actually are. The masses are in middle America, right? You know, Minnesota, Iowa, all of these things. And you're 100% right. That's how Donald Trump actually ends up winning, right? By not catering to the edges, but by catering to the middle.
That's why I shouted out my brother Ice. He's teaching somewhere in Boston, Harvard, one of them big schools. And he taught me driving across the Brooklyn Bridge one day. I think I was dropping him off. I was doing something, but I knew like I was dropping him off. I was leaving Manhattan. And he was the one who taught me that. And he said, you think that America's black. And this is a guy who's not black. And he said, you think America's black because you're here in New York. You think everything, the culture is this, is that. He's like, if you actually look at America, you're 1 to 5%
That's exactly
of America.
10, 13%, 13%.
That guy saw years later when we connected back, I can't remember how we connected back, and he saw over 10, 15 years later what I've done, who I've become, and he couldn't believe that I remember that conversation over the bridge. It was Brooklyn Bridge, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I love that point because I think it's really important that we as black entrepreneurs build companies that not only deliver for black people, but deliver for a much bigger, all of America, right? Or all of the globe. And I think so often we can get lost in our influence, which so often comes from the New Yorks, the LAs, the Miamis, that we forget about middle America, right?
Yes.
So I love that insight. I want to go back a little bit because we got here because you were saying you spent a year, 18 months not spending on anything, right? What did you do with that money? What was the purpose of not spending?
The purpose of not spending that money was to be able to find myself in places that I wasn't before, if that made sense. You know, they say more money, more problems. I feel like I wanted those problems. So I started saving heavily, and I knew that I was gonna have to spend money in the music business and learn, pay to learn. And I knew that no one was coming and giving me a handout. So I had to have, I wouldn't say an abundance, I had to have money that I could afford to lose. So I was basically saving for 18 months for what I didn't know that I could afford to lose, if that makes sense. And we, like, shout out to Rashad and the guys from Earn Your Leisure where I come from, but Earn Your Leisure for you guys. He said something the other day that really hit my soul. And I was telling Jason Lee to have a look at it. He said, most people that look like us have made money or became rich, like as in the billionaires, from partnerships. Kanye, Jay-Z. He named a lot of people who had became rich from partnerships. And not enough of us became rich from ownership. And it really hit my soul, and it made me think about the same times you're talking about, because all I wanted to do was have some form of ownership. Shout out to Don Londres. I'm probably 99 or 98.7% owner. And I had to take the steps what I didn't know was gonna be like a chopping board to get into the top without actually having help. And I'm not saying we're at the top of the top, but we're on a great level right now and we're in a great space. And to be able to do that on your own with the support of a street team and family, shout out to my mom. I remember the same time we're talking about during them 18 months, my mom had cancer. My mom had breast cancer. And I remember watching, shout out to Clay, man, he will remember this very well. I remember talking to my mom earlier on Skype, and she had showed me, I don't even want to get sensitive on this, but she showed me her hair falling out. And I think that's the first time that it really hit me that my mom had cancer. And for my mom to get over that and still turn around and tell me you're not leaving. Imagine missing your mom. You haven't seen her for 4, maybe 5 years, and she gets struck with cancer. You're not thinking of your career. You're not thinking of where I'm going. You just start thinking about going back. And all I could think of was trying to be there for my mom. And my mom sent her sister-in-law, Andrea, she probably thinks I forgot, but she didn't, with a message for me. And she told me that message in Manhattan when she came over to New York. And it still sticks with me. And she said, your mom would be so pissed if you left this place. I was one of the illegals that they talk about. You might think coming from England, how are you illegal? We go to war with you, we do all this stuff. I thought the same thing. But I came here to America and they didn't care whether I was from England or from Mexico or Africa. You're illegal. And I had to go through a 4-year process before I could get my life together and just have everything shaping. And thank God, with the grace of God, my mom beat the breast cancer. And she was able to see her son on the other side. She was able to see her son buy her a house and do all of the crazy things that a son would do if he really loves his mother, you know? Shout out to my father. I don't know him, but yo, one day he'll be watching this, I'm sure. Shout out to him, deserve a slap.
So just real quick, I want to punch into that. You talked about coming over here as an immigrant. You see the landscape right now in America as it relates to immigrants, right? America is a land of all immigrants, right? What is your kind of point of view around what's going on in the American policy changes, philosophy as it relates to immigration?
I respect some of it. I respect, it's such a 50-50 balance because I came here and was an immigrant. America was built off immigrants. But at the same time, you can't have an overflow of immigrants. You can't have people doing crazy violent crimes that they would do back in their island or back in their countries and then bringing it here. I feel like there has to be some form of a balance.
Let's get back into your story. So if we go back to where we were, right? You are in the States, you've saved money, you're spending wisely. So you got the Beamer that makes you look like you balling, but you were smart in terms of how you did it.
Add the Benz.
You had the Benz, right?
The
That
Benz.
makes it look like you're balling, but you did it very smart and intelligently. You're stacking money and bread, right? Music is your first.
My first love, man.
How do you break into the American music scene?
It was crazy, man. A little help was from someone like I said earlier, French Montana, because everyone's got to have a little break. And when you said it, I was thinking, oh, well, Post Malone was my first break. No, it wasn't. My first break was actually after 6 months of nagging French Montana and telling him I had the best producer in the world and I wanted him to work with him. And his name was Harry Fraud. And French looked at me like, not in a bad way, but it's like, Dre, you want me to go in the studio and work with this white boy? Like, what the fuck you talk about? I'm from I'm from the Bronx. I'm from uptown, baby. And like, I had to like show French a different side of the game. And I wanted him to come to the studio in Brooklyn. And after 6 months, a lot of you don't know it. He mentioned it on Drink Champs. Shout out to Nori. I had all to do with French Montana's break, his first big break in the game. Not his break. In his head, he did Cocaine City. He had the DVD. Shout out to Smack DVD, and the rest of the guys. he had his platform where he had a Nicki Minaj, where he had all these artists on the stairs doing what they do. I remember the first real big break didn't seem like it because I was pissed. This guy brought me up to Yonkers, and anyone who knows New York, who knows Yonkers, it's not really a place anyone goes. So this guy brought me to Never Never Land. I go up to Yonkers, and we're just watching people play basketball. Bro, I love basketball, but I don't want to be out here for 3-4 hours watching people play basketball. Met Jada Kiss, saw Styles P, saw the whole D Block. Little did I know that French was working on starting to work with Jada Kiss and starting to work with these guys. And I then presented something to French that he couldn't believe. And it was a song called New York Minute. I don't know if anyone remembers that. New York Minute was the first record that I had French and this producer called Harry Fraud work together. After having them work on that, then they started making records, what everybody probably knows, called Shot Caller. And that's when I felt like I had my first break. But it wasn't my break. I felt like it was my break. It wasn't. It was actually my learning. I had to learn the business. You think everyone's your friends. Yo, I'm just making music with my friends. I'm just doing this. And I remember Post telling me that years later, and I had to learn and told him, no, brother, you're not making music with your friends. The reason why I learned it is because they both made money off this song. But guess who didn't? Guess who didn't make no money off this song?
You were just the connector.
I was the connector, but I didn't know.
You didn't have any paperwork.
No, exactly. You just said it, D. I didn't have no paperwork. I didn't have my paperwork ready. When I introduced these guys and they made this song, I should have put my foot down and said, absolutely. A and B, there's no C without me. And I wasn't able to see that C was called cash. You understand? I didn't have no C. I was still on A to B. So that taught me about the music business. And years later, when I started doing other stuff, it made me stronger. And going back to your point, that was my first big break for me. And also, shout out to my brother, Funkmaster Flex. When I started hearing him drop them bombs and hearing rewinding the song 4 or 5 times, my gut feeling was like, wow, you did that. So it didn't matter if it was for anyone. Sometimes people back at home, you have to realize not everything you do is going to be seen that day. Most of you don't even know this story until I'm telling you today. So you wouldn't know that that's your break. You wouldn't know that that's your time and that's what you saw. For me, that was the moment when I said, I did that. I can do that. This is being played on Hot 97 today because of me. And whether the artist felt like it was because of them, no. In my head, it was because of me. And I knew I was right because you guys wouldn't even know each other if it wasn't for me. So I said, okay, you did that. You can do more. And I felt like your question was so good, if I really think about it, that was my first big break. Not me and Post Malone. Me and Post Malone was the big break for me to crack the code in America. But I had to learn so much more before that. The artists that I was taking back and forth from the UK to New York to learn. By the time he came back in 2014, I told him, I met this guy called Post Malone. His name wasn't even Post Malone. His name was Austin Post. And at that time, I felt like the guy who came back from the UK was getting pissed off of me because when I'm really on something, it's all I talk about. Like I really talk things into existence. If you hear me at home, you keep saying the same things over and over again, you make it become materialized. It becomes something that if everyone around you only hears the same thing over and over again, they don't mix your words. They know what you're about. This, and this only. And I felt like that's where I am with the tequila. I felt like that's where I am with the moment and that moment in time. And then yes, after I met Post Malone, I'll explain that to you in a second, I'm sure.
That's exactly where I was going next. Okay, yeah.
Post Malone, I would put my backpack on and said I was gonna leave, but not just leave. I was gonna go to California and go to LA. And it was around the Grammys time. And I left New York and everyone thought I was crazy. I didn't just leave New York. I left for a trip and I told people that I'm probably gonna go to California and never come back. shout out to Noriega. I knew all these guys the same this time. Like we all had a little, a little inside crew of people, and everyone laughed at me. They didn't laugh, but they had this look like, where are you going? And I tried to explain to them that I know it seems like I'm going far and it's across the other side of the country, but it was the same hours that I left England. So I left England 5-6 hours and moved to New York. So another 5-6 hours to LA didn't seem that big to me, apart from the 3-hour difference that killed me. But other than that, like, I just left. And shout out to this guy named Bronze in the UK. He was in Miami at the time, and he had moved from Miami to Cali. And the timing, we would just speak on the phone. It's crazy. We had the same friends back home. Shout out to Hayes, shout out to Stabs. We're the same friends back home. And through mutual friends, we had been in contact. So me and him would talk maybe once every couple months or something like that. And then he found out I was in LA. He was in LA. And he told me about this house today it sounds normal to you guys, but he told me about this house, and this house wasn't called a content house. This house was just a house full of guys. There was gamers, and I was trying to explain, like, what's gamers? Like, I was trying to understand what the hell is gamers. And it was a house full of gamers, a couple of producers. Shout out to FKI First. First is also from Atlanta, and he came over. I was already there. He came over. I remember everyone was making this big fuss about First. And there was a house full of producers, writers, and everybody else was like gamers. And this guy called Jason Stokes, he brought over his best friend at the time from Dallas called Austin Post. And Post didn't have any money. He just left his parents, followed his friend who was following his gaming dream. And he said, you chase your dream. And little did Post know that chasing his dream will make him bump into another guy chasing his dream. And together, after we met and I decided, he took 6 months. Can you believe it? All of you at home, don't think it happened overnight. 6 months might be long to you, but when you don't live in a place, it's actually longer. And 6 months before Post said, okay, I want you to be my manager, or I want you to, let's do a deal. Let's get together, let's work. And after that 6 months, we took another 6 months of making music, refining the sound, and just getting it to where it was. And I remember at night, this guy would play the guitar, and all the girls, everyone would crowd around. If it was outside, it would be by the fire. If it was inside the kitchen, he would be sitting on the island and playing guitar. And I just remember this kid was 18 years old, and he sounded like he was 39 years old or 38. And I was like, how does he have such an old soul singing Sublime? And I was just like, okay, him. He's gonna bring me back into the music business, because I fell out of it. I love music, but I fell out of the business. I didn't want nothing to do with the music business because it was disgusting. It still is today. It was disgusting. And if you look up Hunter S. Thompson, he has a saying about the hallways being filled with plastic and how nasty the music business is. I learned that and kind of separated myself, and Post helped bring me back into it. And at the time as well, I think I was the only person around him that knew so many famous people at the time. French Montana just moved to LA. I remember this guy had to go back east, and I was the only person at the time that he could really trust, leaving his Rolls Royce Wraith with, the Wraiths. And that whole time, Post's first video shoot was in the Wraith. French probably don't even know that till today. His first little fake video shoot was in that car. And I started bringing him around French Montanas, the this, the that, and just like bringing him, and Food God, this one. Just so many people that was around the Kardashians, because French was around the Kardashians at the time. I think he was dating Khloe. And there was just like a lot of things I was seeing that I couldn't believe. I'm walking into the studio and Khloe Kardashian saying, hey, Dre. And like, I just like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to make this. I'm going to make it. I'm going to become as big as they can in the industry today. And everyone's going to know my name one day, whether they like it or not.
You make the connection between French and Harry Fraud. You discover Post, and you guys have an incredible run. You've had staying power in this industry. You know, it sounds like you might have taken a step out here or there, but you've had staying power. What is your advice for any artists, potential manager out there in the music game? What does it take to have true staying power in this industry?
The first 2 words I will tell you what it takes is thick skin. If you don't have thick skin, you're not staying in power. There's no other option for you to not take things personal. I learned what I'm going to tell you now. It's business. It's not personal. And the minute you start taking business personal in the industry, and whether it's film and television, whether it's music, no matter what, in entertainment, you start taking it personal, it's going to take you personal. You keep taking it as business and it's not personal, and you'll be able to keep going. You'll be able to brush things off your shoulder that you might have found really tough before. The 2 words I would say is thick skin.
Thick skin, thick skin. So thick skin kept you in the game. Thick skin gave you lasting power.
And also consistency. I had to be consistent. Keep delivering. Even when you think that delivery is not working, it's like working out in the gym. You could be a fat boy, you could be chubby. It doesn't matter. If you're going to the gym every day, something's gonna change. There's gonna be some time and some moment where you start to see it. But in the beginning, first month, 6 weeks, you're not seeing no change.
That's
you're
right.
like, but I'm changing my diet. I'm eating vegetables now. I didn't eat vegetables before. You don't see the complete change on your body until you consistently keep going and ask yourself, why am I doing this? And then after 6 weeks to 8 weeks, you start seeing a difference. So I treat it like I treat life like the gym. I treat business like the gym. You just gotta keep going. Even if not the gym, I run outside on the street. I'm up to 7 miles now.
Oh,
Most
wow.
days I'm jogging probably 7 miles. Last week I did 7 miles coming back from 11. I had 3 hours sleep and it took me 1 hour and 36 minutes. The next day when I didn't want to go, I woke up on the Monday, I did a Sunday jog. I woke up on the Monday, I did not want to go. I promise you, I was like, no way. It was a sluggish start. Can you believe that day I did the same thing in 1 hour and 16 minutes, 20 minutes faster?
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
And that's why I say, you don't know what tomorrow holds. So you have to keep going every day consistently until you see the difference, till you hold yourself accountable. And I think that's what made me get to a certain level today. And you could say, oh, he's at that level and he's at this. I see higher now. Every level you get to, you want to get higher and higher and higher. And that's the same thing with this show, the Blackprint. Like, you might have started all these years ago and like, okay, we're going to see where this gets to. We'll see how far we'll take this. But now look, you've interviewed some of the biggest people in our industry, and you didn't think, I'm not saying you didn't want it, but
I didn't want it, so you're right.
Yeah. In the beginning, you had to stay consistent.
That's right.
To make it and to be here. And now we're here on Revolt, 50,000 cameras looking at us, and we're looking at the world different.
That's right. So you clearly did your thing in the music space, clearly made a name for yourself, and then you broke out into spirits. So I want to talk about that for a second. What made you decide to get behind your own tequila brand? Well, I'll say liquor brand in general, and then you can tell me if tequila was the thing.
I was talking to 50 Cent last week, and we was talking about the hurdles in this game. And I didn't know it was tough. I just looked and saw so many of our peers that had done it.
We're doing it.
Yeah, I saw Jay-Z left the music business, but he was holding gold bottles. I saw Puff, I saw Diddy doing it with Ciroc. And I just started looking and saying to myself, this has another avenue. And I heard it last week when someone said that Andre Harrell they was walking into an office. It might have been Eli Maroon. Shout out to Eli. Andre Harrell was walking in and was explaining to somebody that this is the new music business. I was like, how would he say that? But he definitely meant that this is the new business that we can get into that we are not.
Mm-hmm.
We don't control the music business. People who control the music business don't look like me and you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a lot of people wouldn't believe that because all you see
It's us.
is
All you
us.
hear is us.
So when you get to the top, you'll see it's not us running the game and it's not us cutting the checks.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to figure out where you fit in the middle of all that to getting your own check, if that makes sense. So I said, all right, if you told me today, would I do this again? I'll probably tell you no. Because this has been, I thought the music industry was tough. This has been one of those industries where it's like cracking an egg nonstop and the egg is hard and it doesn't want to crack for you. And I had to keep going and going and going and going and going until everyone started thinking, this guy's not going to quit. This guy's not going to give up. Like, I took a step back from the Post Malone business to start my own business, if that makes sense. I had to put 100% focus into my business. What am I going to do for my 2 daughters? What am I going to do for the next generation? How am I going to be able to show game to all of us watching this at home? How can you crack the code? Do you know, it's the same thing we talked about before, that consistency and having thick skin. And that's what's helped me today to take it to the next level. That's what's helped me go to break the mold. And I feel like I still head down horse, you know, like the horse. When a horse is racing, the horse doesn't look left and right. How many times have you seen a horse race? The horse, his head is there. The horse has visors.
Right, focused.
Yeah. When the horse is racing, the horse can't look left and right because he has visors. And that's where I am today. And that's what brought me to where I am today. Looking in between that lane of your own. You have that space, keep going. And don't look left and right.
I want to hit that. So what is the lane you are carving out for yourself in the liquor space, in the spirit space? What are you injecting into the liquor cap? What is Dre's lane?
My lane is today, when you look at the liquor space, people are just trying to sell you a spirit. I started in the liquor business by doing a wine called Maison 9. I don't know if you heard of it.
Yep,
Maison 9. Shout out to James. We created Maison 9, and we did something incredible. And like, I go back to you again. Guys, I didn't know how incredible it was what we was creating. Do you know when I knew? I knew it was incredible because it tasted good. The bottle was a different shape. We did everything different. Post wanted the top to be a crown. We had to make a glass crown, go and do things that had never been done before. But do you know when I knew that this was incredible? Years later, when I was at the LVMH meeting. For all of you who don't know who that is, that's Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. This company runs the world.
Absolutely.
I sat down with them and the guy, Alessandro, said to me, yeah, we saw these pink Vespers and mopeds. This was on the photo shoot of us launching it. And he said, we came into work on Monday morning and the whole afternoon, from the morning to the afternoon, was discussing how you was disruptive. So even when you go back to the beginning, they were saying, how did you guys have pink mopeds in the wine business? And I said, why would you guys go to a meeting discussing what we were doing? They said, because that's how big what you was doing and disruptive was. So that's when I figured out that, oh, okay, we made it. We made an impact. And that showed me that what I'm doing is still the same thing. I'm still in a lane of doing things differently. This is the lifestyle. If you can name me another alcohol that is all about the lifestyle, you can't. Everyone's square. We're the circle. We don't want squares in our circle. So we have to provide the lifestyle for what people want today, for what people see. And that's what we created. That's what I created. And that's what my team's creating. And we're not stopping until we're at the top.
Last question before we get you out of here. 50 years from today, when people talk about you, what do you want them to say that Dre London stood for?
Wow, what a question. 50 years from now, I want people to see that this guy came, he saw, he conquered, and he cared about the next generation. I'm sitting here today because of you watching this. I'm sitting here today. obviously because you wanted me here and you guys all wanted me here. But the biggest thing that I take away from that 50 years is you can watch this in 50 years and you can say he did this and he did that. I want to leave a legacy for my family, for my daughter's daughters, for my daughter's sons' sons. Look at the Rockefeller family. Look at the Carnegies. Look at some of the biggest families in the world today and look what they've left behind. Look at the Kellogg's family. Look at the Cargill family. Some of these people don't never heard of these families or they just know of a cereal called Kellogg's. But I want to leave a legacy behind like they did. 100 years or more ago, this guy was doing some of the biggest tax breaks, insurance for his family. The Rockefeller family now, when they want to come up with an idea, oh, I'm going to do this business, I'm going to try this. They're not using their own money. They're taking money out the insurance, the big insurance that's been built all these hundreds of years, able to continue. If it fails, it doesn't matter because that $1 million, $2 million, $5 million that they used to start this business didn't affect the family. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create a legacy that continues on, that we can all not affect our family when wanting to continue on. We have to build generational wealth. And that's why I'm doing it. The 2 words is generational wealth. And no, money isn't everything, but I tell you something, without it, you'll figure it out it is.
Dre London, brother, incredible interview. Any final words you want to give to the audience before we get out of here?
I think I gave them the best final words just now, but my final words I will say is never give up. Never you give up on your dreams. When you wake up in the morning, remember that dream you had last night. Don't stop. Because that dream can come true when you wake up in the morning and you follow through.
Dre London, entrepreneur, legacy builder, man who's all about building generational wealth. And you said it over and over again, whether you were talking about French Montana, Post Malone, the wine company, the tequila company, the disruptor. Thank you for bringing your gems. Thank you for bringing your truth to the Blackprint King. I'm about to go to the back and drink a couple of these bottles.
Cheers.
Thank you for being here, fam. Dre London, incredible story, goes from the UK to the States, ultimately finds his way from the projects to business mind, business entrepreneur, business mogul. I think there's 3 big lessons that I took away from our conversation. The first one was this idea that when you're the connector, you have to find ways to monetize that connection. He learns this lesson the hard way when he connects Harry Fraud and French Montana, and they have a song that blows up and he doesn't get to participate. I think so often, many of us have great connections and we are connecting friends, we're connecting family, we're connecting friends, we're connecting networks. But we often forget to find ways to monetize those connections. And so I think from Dre, we learned that it is important to not just make the connection, but if that's really your gift, if that's really what you do, then you have to find a way to put that on paper, to make a contract so that if that business relationship succeeds, you get to participate in it as well. The second thing I think we learned from him is he is consistently choosing the long term over the short term, right? One of the best examples of that is when he goes 18 months without spending any cash. Even when he does, try to shine on folks, he's got an old bin so he can look the part without it costing him. I think this idea that he is willing to endure short-term pain in order to get to where he wants to be in the long term is something that we can all hold on to and remember. The third thing that I think we see Dre consistently doing throughout his career is really learning how to crack the code. It's one thing to say you want to be the first to do this or do something impossible. It's another thing to actually figure out the work of what it takes. As he comes to the States, you can hear him talk about how he's studying American culture. He's learning the words, he's learning the language. And you see him do things like studying the NFL, not because he wants to or loves the NFL, but because he sees it as an important piece for him to be able to connect with people in the States. Even when he's breaking into the music business, the liquor business, you can hear him using the internet to help him understand the game so that he can then in part crack the code. And so you can't just say you want to do something, you got to do the work. You got to study, you got to do the research to figure out what does the playing field actually look like and how do you win in that playing field. Dre London, entrepreneur, generational wealth builder, incredible interview for the Blackprint. See you next time.